We are amazing because our passion is limitless and our drive is intense. Therefore, you will not deny our grind. You are now listening to the Faith, Grind, and Inspire podcast.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another great episode of Faith, Grind, and Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Gene Alert.
This is Colbert the Alchemist.
And today we have a very special guest. One of the guys, because, you know, we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about opportunity, and we talk about making things happen for yourself, right? This guest, we talked about Kevin Hart a lot of times, different reasons, but this is the man sitting next to me that actually gave me the opportunity to actually produce the show when doors were getting shut in my slammed in my face, right? I called this man, right, who I met through parties, we used to throw parties at the 40/40 Club, and through networking, I met this young man, and this guy was legendary, man. He was telling me about the comedy world and in every aspect. He knew everybody. He worked with everybody. Everyone respected this guy. And in business, when you are in business, when you talk about integrity, and we talk about this all the time, it's what people say behind you, right? Which is important. Not while in your face. It's like behind your back. It's like, what's going on? That's how you judge people, right? And this man, Jeffrey Gurian, everyone talks good about you, man. Everybody respects you. You've been consistent through the time in my life, which is 11 plus years, 12 years, right? And you've been consistent, and we'll talk about the story. But my man, Jeffrey Gurian, right? He's a comedy writer. He's a comedian. He's an author. He's a doctor. He does everything. He's in real estate.
He's got too many hyphens in his name.
Too many hyphens in his name,
yeah,
man.
That's what he's got.
And he just said, he started off, he said, I'm gentrifying this bitch.
Whether you like it or not. I'm here to stay. Right?
He's here to stay. That's what he said. That's what he said, man.
I love it.
I love it, man. So, Jeffrey, man, thank you for coming on to the show, bro.
Thank you for having me, Gene. It's so great to be here with you.
We here, man. We at the Garden, bro.
I'm proud of you, man. This is so dope, man.
Big
Doing
things.
a thing from Cumulus is major. People do podcasts all the time, but not everybody is associated with a major station like this, and it's incredible. Wow. But I'm not surprised because you do those kind of things. You go out and you make things happen. A lot of people just talk about stuff. You actually go out and do it. So I was pleasantly surprised, let me say that, when I found out that you were a Cumulus. A lot of people invite me to do podcasts. It's in their basement. It's in their living room. You know what I mean? Right. Like I'm doing one, and it's from the stage of the comic strip. That meant a lot to me because that's the club where Eddie Murphy started, where Chris Rock was discovered, Jerry Seinfeld came out of there, Adam Sandler. So I'm doing it on the stage, and that's what you're doing. And so I appreciate being here with you.
Oh, man. Thank you, man. Thank you. So I want
And Colbert, of course.
Yes. It's an honor and pleasure. I got to just get a little understanding of your background, and I just saw, and of course I've known Gene over 15 years, and he just spoke so highly of you. And I remember seeing you at events, but now I understand how much of a pivotal aspect you were in his life. So it's an honor and pleasure to be sitting here with you as well.
Thank you so much.
So Kobe, man, I'm gonna tell you the story since he's here.
Please.
So we're ACA. We started ACA. We're 2 years in. Remember I told you 2 episodes back, I said I was in these parties. I was throwing the parties for my clients. Everyone's like, this is a great event. And I wasn't happy.
Right.
And I said, this can't be it for me, right? I can't just be doing these red carpet events, celebrity events. This is not it. I'm more than this.
Yeah.
So I went to a comedy club. I went to Caroline's, and I saw Will Savance, and I saw some more. Around February, I went there, and I said, this is it. I met Will Savance, and I said to Will, I want to do a comedy show. And he said, comedy show? I said, you ever produced a show before? I said, no. But I was like, it should be the same concept
Right.
of
doing
promoting.
it, right.
I've promoted 3,000 people at a club. Like,
Right.
it should be the same thing. So he said, all right, cool.
At the time you approached him, did you know he was Haitian also?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, because he just performed and he was doing, why you? Yeah.
Exactly.
And he was telling about his Haitian parents and the gift. The gift that his dad gave him was a broom. To sweep. That's what his dad gave him for Christmas, a broom. He said, yo, you got to sweep up, man. He said, use it. It goes like this. You know? So anyway, so Will was handing out flyers at the end of the night. He said, I got this guy, Kevin Hart. And then from Philly, he wants to get back in comedy and he wants to do this thing. I said, all right, cool. To me, I'm like, it's easy. I knew the place I wanted to do it, theater at Westbury. And I said, let me just call him. Call him. Nothing. Call him again. Nothing. Email. Nothing. I was trying different ways, different promoters. Nothing. Mm-hmm. But I still had ACA.
Yeah.
And me and my partners are talking about it and nothing. 4 months. Nothing. So, but throughout this 4 months, I'm building a relationship with my man Jeffrey. And then one day, so I read this book, and I think every person should read it. It's called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? It's the story of Reginald Francis Lewis, the first black billionaire.
Okay.
Right? And in this book, the concept of Reginald Francis Lewis is a true story. Reginald Francis Lewis was an attorney, and he used to help Michael Milken and all these billionaires acquire companies, right? Mm-hmm. And in the 60s and 70s, he was still a black man, even though he went to Harvard and he was really educated. He knew how to make money.
What do you mean he was still a black man?
He's still a black man, man. In
Just because you go to Harvard, it doesn't change your ethnicity.
No, it doesn't.
Don't matter.
It doesn't matter. So he could not, no one wanted to sell him companies to him, right? So what he used to do is he used to use, say, Michael Milken or any of his Caucasian counterparts to get into the door, sign the contract so they would think they would sell to someone else. And once they got into the room, then they said, here I am. Right?
Ta-da.
Ta-da! And then they were doing this in the 60s, 70s. So I was like, you don't have to do this in 2009.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then I read the book again because I was like, success leaves clues and it's the same thing. So I called and I said, this strategy cannot work, man. And I was like, you know what? Let me try it. So I called up Jeffrey. I said, Jeffrey, do you want to do something with me? You don't have to put up any money. You don't have to do anything except get me into a door. And he said, you're going to produce the show with me. He said, no problem. This was on a Monday. Tuesday morning, he calls me up and says, Gene, I got a meeting on Friday with the vice president of Live Nation. I said, God damn. I was like, what? Did you understand what I said? It took me 4 months and no callbacks, nowhere. I called Jeffrey on a Monday afternoon around 4:30. I'll never forget this. Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, he tells me he got a meeting with me with the vice president of Live Nation on Friday. So we get to the room. Jeffrey's like, you ready? You ready? Don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. You ready? I was like, yeah, I'm ready, man. I'm ready. So we get to the meeting. All these guys with clipboards and notes ready for him. Mm-hmm.
They thought I was white.
Yeah, they thought you were white. They didn't know, man. They didn't know you were Jeffrey Gurian.
Under certain lights, I look white.
Yeah, actually, in certain lights. Not all lights.
Not all lights, but certain lights. Right.
But you gentrifying this village.
That's it. Yeah.
So we sit in the room, right? And they put me in like this corner. And Jeffrey, so they're like, all right, Jeff, tell me what show you want. Jeff was like, oh, no, it's not me. It's him. They all turn around, look at me. And I'm like, Kevin Hart. And they're like, who the hell is Kevin Hart? I said, Kevin Hart is going to be the next big thing. And Jeffrey believes it, and I believe it, and it's going to work. And they were like, well, it's not going to work here.
Wow.
The Wayans brothers, remember? The Wayans brothers didn't sell out here. Who do you think you are? And I said, look, I'm telling you it's going to work. I'm telling you, just believe in me. So we, right there, they went and called the agent for Kevin. It was like, hey, is there a guy that wants to book Kevin? And it was like, yo, man, he's so annoying, man. This guy comes, just sits in my office for hours, won't take no for an answer, very persistent. And then and Jason was like, yeah, well, he's here now. And now it's two of them. And
that was Mike B.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, we end up getting the show.
Yeah.
Right? We got the show. He introduced me to Tony Rock.
Yeah.
And
Tony was our feature, and Will wound up being our MC.
Opener, he was the opener and
Shout
the
out
MC.
to Will.
And we sold out. We had 3,400 seats.
I remember that.
It was bananas, right? But I'm telling you this story to tell you that I want to thank you because of that show opened up the doors for everything, right? Because I ended up doing comedy tours around the country with Capone, Corey Holcomb, all these people. Like I ended up producing another show with a Murphy and a Rock. I'm a family man, entrepreneur, investment property specialist. I am your Brooklyn, Long Island agent who understands the importance of building a strong future for your legacy. Allow me to guide you through your next real estate experience. It's finally time to buy a house and make it your home. First, you'll need a trusted advisor to guide you through the process. In Gene Alert and the Sabre team, you'll find just that with confidence, focus, and tact.
When it's time to list your home, you want to ensure you choose the most resourceful, unwavering team to represent your interests.
Our mission is to help everyone find their place in the world. Which was cool. Charlie, God bless the dead, Charlie Murphy and Tony Rock on one stage. Like, but it wouldn't happen if you didn't make that call.
So how come I wasn't involved in all those other things?
I don't know. You got busy, man. But the thing is, it was more of like, you know. And then the funny thing is, me and my partner, we started a company called A&S Productions for Global Visions. We shut down the business because it wasn't. I realized it wasn't. I wasn't in the comedy business. You know, I didn't want to be a real production. I didn't want to do it for that. You know, I got into the business because I love entertaining people. I want people to have a great time, right? Absolutely. And I want to add value to people's lives, right? And so it was a good point of my life, right? But then it was a stepping stone, right? But so I appreciate you, and you give people their flowers now, and you tell people what they mean to you now versus, you know, somewhere else, and you're like at the funeral, and you're like, hey, this guy was great. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. So, I believe the same thing. Yeah. And working with you was the first time I heard the expression grind. You were on the grind 24/7. 24/7. You had a team. You went out. You had sent people through neighborhoods with flyers.
4 o'clock
We
in
did
the
a lot
morning.
of press, man, and we did a lot of press. When Kevin came to town, we were on all the radio stations. I called everybody that I knew. You know, it was an amazing thing, and we turned it into a benefit for Haiti because it was right after the earthquake.
It was right after the earthquake.
Right after the earthquake,
remember
and
that.
I called some friends of
flashing
mine,
out
some
flyers
Haitian
for that
friends.
too.
Hey, yo.
Yeah.
Unique.
Unique, I introduced you
Yeah,
to Unique,
Unique, yep.
and because it was right after the earthquake,
Yep.
and Haiti needed so much help, and so all those people, like you said, 3,400 people showed up.
Yeah.
It was
yeah.
it was an
It was
amazing, amazing experience, and I've been
was
friends
beautiful.
with, you know, with,
You
I
know-
see Kevin ever since.
You know what's so crazy that you said that? You heard the word grind. I remember the first time I said it in front of you, right?
You do,
I
yeah.
said, "Yo, I'm grinding, man. And it's grind time." And he was like, "Explain this grind to me." What do you mean by grinding? You know, what does
never
that
said- I
mean?
hear-
I said
I-
the work. Yo, you just brought that up again, and it just took me back to that meeting at your house. You were like, "What do you mean grinding?"
Because I'm a wordsmith, and words stick out in my mind.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
it was the first time I heard that expression, but I inherently knew what it meant.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense when
Yeah.
someone's on the grind. You're constant, and that's what you did, and it was a very successful. People loved it.
Yes.
Jordan Rock came through.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
Chris's baby brother, who's now doing so well. I mean,
Yeah,
he was
so
on
well,
Judd
man.
Apatow show Love.
Wow.
You know, it was really incredible. So 10 years later, finally tell me what happened that night that you came late.
I wasn't late. I was still grinding outside.
Was that what happened?
Yeah.
But that
You
was
were
that what
doing all
happened?
the- this guy
'Cause
started doing all the press.
Kevin
I'm
was
in
on
the-
stage already, and I'm like, "Where's my partner Gene?" And they were asking me for stuff, and I was like,
Yeah, I'm
"He must be
running around.
somewhere." Gaina didn't know; nobody knew.
Yeah.
They said you were in a car with some people,
Nah,
and I was
man.
like, "But
I was outside grinding, trying
Oh,
to
is
get
that
more
where you
people.
were? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because we had to turn away like 400 people.
there were so many
there was
people. I know it was such a
so we had to
popular
figure
event."
out. We had to figure out on
was so much
you know,
promo that went into
we
that.
had to figure out where we're gonna get these chairs from. So we had to go to different places, hotel,
man.
and get chairs to bring them back to the venue. So it was, I'm telling you, crazy.
And we did great stuff with Kevin. He did promos for us.
Yeah.
He did video promos.
I'm
we were
proud
in a
of Kev,
hotel.
man.
We were in a hotel. Isn't it amazing what he's done?
Yeah.
Crazy. He went from
On his way
who's
to the
Kevin
show.
Hart to this.
Kevin Hart.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody knows
To-
the Kevin Hart.
to the highest level, and he tells me he's still not high enough. The last time I saw him, he said he's going for mogul status.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
He's
He's not
grinding.
satisfied with where he is. He's on the grind all the time.
He's on the
Yeah,
ground.
I did see that next.
Do you remember how
Netflix
often
thing
he
put
was
out.
on his phone too? Social
Oh,
media
yeah.
was very big with him. And on his way to the event, he stopped off at a Ferrari dealership, I think. Do you remember that? Yeah. He was already checking out cars.
Checking out cars.
It was just as he was ascending to the levels where he is now, which was amazing. It was so exciting to have had him in those days.
Yeah.
And then at South Beach, and everybody was jealous that we did all the comedy clubs. How'd you get Kevin Hart? You know, it was really truly
Yeah.
an amazing thing.
Yeah. Thanks to Will Savance, man.
Shout out to
And
Will.
Nate
Yeah.
Nate,
too.
remember Nate? Yeah, was his manager. I don't
Yeah.
know if they're still together. I don't know. I haven't seen Nate.
Yeah, I haven't
But
seen Nate.
it's funny that I didn't know that you had met Will before.
Yeah.
And after we did that, somebody tried to do a Haitian comedy festival, and there were so few Haitian comedians that the opening act was white. That's how few Haitian comedians there were. Seriously, I remember that. I was
Wow.
laughing my ass off. I'm like, that's crazy. Because I think Will is the only Haitian comedian that I know. You know
Yeah,
any
yeah.
others?
There are, but I don't know.
They're coming out now.
They're
like
coming out
They're
now.
coming out now. It's about time.
Yeah, local. They're starting to come out now.
Yeah.
There's some
They're big
Haitian
on-
dudes with a good sense of humor,
Yeah,
but
they're big
I
on
haven't
they're
seen
big
it.
on social media
Social
now.
media.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's
So
a lot of comics are doing that on social media instead of performing in the clubs.
Yeah.
They're getting known on YouTube and
Yes.
shit and things
They
like
build,
that.
They build their following through social media,
Through
and
social
then
media.
they're able to do their own little comedy tours. It's a great medium. Times have definitely shifted.
But it's interesting.
It
A lot
is.
of established comedians resent that a lot of people are sidestepping the traditional way of getting known by performing in clubs.
Yeah,
You know,
everything
and
is shifting. The music industry, everything is
Yeah,
shifting.
everything is shifting
Everything
to
is
social
shifting.
media.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Jeff, tell us how does a doctor become a comedian, get into this whole comedy space? Like, how did that happen?
It's
man?
it's a crazy story. When I was 12 years old, I don't know. I must have been a weird kid. I decided I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too sensitive to become a medical doctor. I was a very sensitive child, and in those days, I was overwhelmed by my sensitivity, and I knew it even then. And I knew I couldn't handle life and death situations. So I decided, what kind of doctor could I be where I don't have to deal with that? And I decided I wanted to be a dentist. And then I thought, maybe I want to be an orthodontist. I like making people look beautiful, right? But I was already writing comedy at 12 years old. I was writing comedy for the entertainment of my friends. And I was writing little crazy stories and things. And I used to think, like, I want to be a doctor, but I want to be in comedy, but how can you do both? It's not, I've never heard of such a thing, right? How can you do both? And somehow I managed to put them together, and I never changed my mind. So I went to dental school, and while I was in school, I met Woody Allen. Wow. Because I contrived a way to meet Woody Allen. There was only 3 people in the world that I ever wanted to meet. Wow. Woody Allen, Salvador Dali, and the Beach Boys. And I met them all.
Wow.
And because when I was in my 20s or as a kid, I just had the feeling that I could do anything I wanted to do, that nothing would ever stand in my way. So I met Woody Allen, and he read my earliest material, and he encouraged me to make films. He goes, your comedy is very visual. And, you know, my dream was that he would say to me, Jeffrey, let's make movies together, you know. But when you're a kid, you know, you think things like that. That didn't happen. But he invited me back the next night. I met him at the theater. He was so nice that he invited me back, and he read through all my ideas. And years later, I became friendly with Jack Rollins, who was his longtime manager, who passed away just a few years ago at 100 years old. Wow. But if you look at any of Woody Allen's movies, at the end of the movie, it always says, produced by Rollins and Jaffe. And Jack Rollins not only managed Woody Allen, but he managed Billy Crystal and Robin Williams, the biggest stars of the day. Wow. And he was a supporter of mine, and he helped me for many years. He introduced me to a lot of people. He sent me up to Saturday Night Live, and he said to me, if Woody invited you to come back, he must have really seen something special in you, because that wasn't his style. He didn't really do things like that. And so he inspired me to make these little crazy films. My first series of films was called The Men Who series, and it was about men who do very unusual things, like men who take a pitchfork to the movies, men who enjoy Latin dancing with tools. I had a guy do the tango with a wrench that was unbelievable, you know. And Peter Dinklage was in one of my movies, the guy who's the star of Game of Thrones.
Yes.
I did a movie called Men Who Dance Where They're Not Supposed to. You know how on like on the street they have these parking signs, no parking Tuesday and Thursday? Yeah. So I had a sign made, my artist made a perfect sign. It said, no dancing Tuesday and Thursday or any other time. And Peter Dinklage gets arrested for dancing in a no dancing zone. He's dancing in the street, and the cop runs over and arrests him for dancing when he's not supposed to, you know? They're little crazy, absurd films. And who knew in those days that he'd go on to be one of the biggest stars in the world, right? So, I go through dental school, and I'm always writing. And then when I graduated, so I meet Woody, I start doing these films, and then I started writing for comedians. When Saturday Night Live came out, I was doing these little crazy films on the street, and they were like false news items. Like several men were arrested for smearing cream cheese on the ankles of elderly women who wore their stockings rolled down like bagels. Have you ever seen the old women? Usually old Jewish women, they wear their stockings rolled down around their ankles. It looked like bagels to me, right? So I got my grandmother, my dear grandmother, who was so sweet. She made believe she had a Jewish accent. And she said, you know, we have 2 kinds of stockings, one for milk and one for meat. You know, like kosher people, they don't mix milk and meat. She says, we have 2 kinds of stockings, one for milk and one for meat. And this crazy man, he smears cream cheese on my meat stockings, and I can't get it off. And I zoom in with my Super 8 camera on her ankles, and there's cream cheese on there. And it's just like crazy shit like that. And I did films about the masters of disguise. It was 2 men who commit crimes. They're master criminals who disguise themselves as inanimate objects. So it starts out with 2 men disguised as coats rob a hat store. They come in over the arms of 2 other men, and they say, just act natural like we're your coats and nobody will get hurt, right? And police draw composite drawings of the perpetrators, and it's 2 coats, you know? One man is described as like a tan trench coat. The other man resembled an overcoat, possibly black, but maybe navy blue. And so it's all these crimes by the masters of disguise. So I bring this up to Saturday Night Live. But how I got there, I was driving a pimp mobile in those days. This is a story. It was made for one of the Isley brothers, right? Now, I had met this pimp from Maryland. And
This is for real?
This is for real. This is for real.
All right.
It was about the time I got tired of my ethnicity. I was bored of being white. So I met this black pimp from Maryland, and he drove a beautiful gold Eldorado. And it had a clear bubble over the driver's seat and a clear bubble over the passenger seat, kind of like the Pope's car, right?
Yeah.
I said, this is who I need to be. So I went to this place in the Bronx where I lived when I was a kid, and I bought this Mandarin orange Eldorado, that the Isley brothers. And I put a Rolls-Royce grill on the front, just like the pimps drove in the 70s. It was an amazing car. It had big white wall tires, straps in the back, amazing. And my wife was like, we're Jewish and we live in Scarsdale. Why am I driving an orange Cadillac? And I'm like, you don't get it. Obviously, you don't get it.
You don't get it.
And it had doctor's plates on it, right? So wherever I drove, people, like cops would check it out. Hookers would look at the car. You know, it didn't make sense because it was a pimp's car with doctor's plates, right? So I drove up to Saturday Night Live because I need to meet these people. I need to be doing films for the show. So when you drive up in a car like that, everybody notices, right? And in those days, you could drive right up to 30 Rock. There was no terrorism in those days. So the street was open. Like these days, you can't get anywhere near it.
Right.
I drove up to 30 Rock, and I have a CB radio in the shape of a telephone. So I make believe I'm on the phone. Because in those days, there was no cell phones. This is before cell phones, right? I drive up. The doorman's there. I throw him a couple of bucks, and I say, watch my car. Lorne Michaels is expecting me. Lorne Michaels never heard of me, right? He was producing Saturday Night Live. It was like a new show. So I go in and I sneak past the security guards, which you cannot do anymore. They'll shoot at you if you try to do that, right? And I get up to the 17th floor, and I meet Alan Zweibel, who was at the time one of the head writers on the show, but who's gone on to become an award-winning producer, director, writer, many books, movies, everything, you know. And he's playing handball on the wall with one of the producers of the show, because everyone was kids in those days. And I tell him what I'm doing, and I introduce myself, and I show him my films. He looks at them. He goes, this is wild. I've never seen anything like this before. And he did something that was so nice. You know how some people tell you who to contact? He actually called his manager for me and asked him to meet with me, which was like an amazing thing. And his manager was a man named David Jonas, who was managing Freddie Prinze at the time. Freddie Prinze, not the original Freddie Prinze, not Freddie Prinze Jr. Freddie Prinze had a show called Chico and the Man back in those days. And this guy, David Jonas, got him the gig on Chico and the Man, and he met with me. And he goes, what do you want this business for? You're a doctor. Who needs it? Why do you need this? And I'm like, because I love comedy and I want to do this. And it took me about a year to learn how to write a joke. And by writing for his guys, I wound up meeting Rodney Dangerfield, and he started doing my jokes on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Wow.
And that's how my name got known, that Rodney Dangerfield was the first big star that I ever wrote for. Because my thing was, because I had another profession, I felt that I needed to write for very famous people in order to get credibility for myself. Because if I was writing for unknowns, then I would look like a joke. Like, you know, like on the Ed Sullivan Show, they had plate spinners and a knife throwing act. And I'm like, I didn't want to look like a novelty. I wanted to be considered as a real comedy writer. So I wound up writing for Joan Rivers and Phil Hartman, one of the stars on Saturday Night Live. And so even legends like Jerry Lewis, Milton Berle was my sponsor in the Friars Club. You know, brought me into the Friars Club, which was amazing. I was the main writer for the Friars Roast for about 12 years.
Wow.
You know, and I got to work with Bruce Willis and so many of the big stars.
Do you have any Eddie Murphy stories?
Only the fact that Eddie, you know, it's so funny because Eddie is not in my book. I did the book on the comic strip with Richie Tinkin, the owner and the founder of the comic strip. And Eddie spent the first 11 years of his career there. And Richie managed him for those years. And it's a great story because he asked Richie to manage him. Richie had started out as a bar owner from the Bronx. At one time, he owned 6 bars in the Bronx. He didn't know anything about show business, but he had a bartender who was an impressionist. And at the time, there was only 2 comedy clubs in the world. Years ago, when comedians wanted to perform, they had to perform in hotels and nightclubs and things. There was no comedy clubs. Bud Friedman opened the Improv in 1963, and Rick Newman opened a place called Catch a Rising Star at the end of 1972. And on June 1st of 1976, Richie Tinkin opened the Comic Strip, which is the only one of those clubs that's still going strong. It's still open. The other clubs are gone. I mean, from New York, the Improv is in L.A., and there's a bunch of them around the country, but the original Comic Strip is still going strong. So Eddie was about 19 years old, and he was in a group called what was it? The Triplets. The Identical Triplets. Two white guys and him, right? The Identical Triplets. Yeah, Rob Bartlett and I'm blanking on the guy's name. He's a comedian. He plays a character called Epi Epperson and wears a helmet. Anyway, these two other guys are still performing, but Eddie was the third guy in the group, 19 years old, and someone suggested that he go to the Comic Strip. The night he showed up, Richie wasn't there. His other partner was there. Eddie came in very arrogant. He wanted to go on stage right away. They made him wait a while, and he got impatient. And the other owner, said to him, "Hey, if you don't like it, you can leave." And Eddie left. Next day, he calls up, and he spoke to Richie. And Richie said, "Hey, I heard what happened, and it's really terrible, and you should come in when I'm here, and I will watch you perform." So he did that. He goes, "I don't want to go against my partner, but if you come in when I'm here, I'll watch you." He came back when Richie was there, and he killed. And Richie said, "No, you have to be here." And so he brought him in. And at the time, he had gotten to be a featured player on Saturday Night Live. And Joe Piscopo was a big proponent of Eddie Murphy. He really believed in him and thought he was very funny. And so one night, the show was running short, and they needed somebody to do some comedy at the end. And Jean Doumanian was the producer for 1 year of Saturday Night Live. And so she asked Joe Piscopo to do 5 minutes of comedy. And he goes, "Why don't you ask Eddie?"
Wow.
Right? So this was Eddie's big break. Eddie calls Richie, and he goes, "They want me to do 5 minutes of comedy." And Richie's like, "So what's the problem?" And he goes, "Well, I curse." And Richie said, "Well, then don't curse and do 5 minutes." And he did the 5 minutes, and he cursed. And they accepted it. For some reason, it was okay. And so when it came time to renew contracts, Richie went up to meet with Gene, and they were going to give him another featured contract. And Richie said, "Hey, he saved your show. You should make him a regular cast member." And at that point, they agreed to make him a cast member, and his salary jumped from $750 a week to $3,000 a week. And that's when Richie started taking his percentage, because up till then, he didn't want to take any money from him, because he goes, he's not making any money.
Yeah.
You know? So
Wow.
so he stayed
History, man.
he stayed with Richie for 11 years, but when he was looking for a manager, Richie turned him down for a few weeks because he said he didn't know how to manage anybody, and he didn't want the responsibility, because he knew that Eddie was going to be a big star. And Eddie went to his mom, and his mom said to him, "Who do you trust most in the world?" And he said, "I trust Richie." He goes, because a lot of black promoters had approached him too, but he felt that they were trying to take advantage of him. He didn't really trust them. So he went with Richie. He finally convinced him, and Richie said, "Okay." And the next thing he knows, Richie told me all these stories. He goes, he found himself on the Paramount lot in his own office in L.A. He was with Eddie most of the time in L.A. As a matter of fact, they had a club in Florida. And he told me this story recently because Richie was my first guest on my own podcast. And he said they were lounging at the pool, he and Eddie, when he got a call from Saturday Night Live that they wanted to see Eddie again. Eddie, it seems, had originally auditioned, and he was turned down. And they had a guy named Charlie Rocket on the show. I don't know if you remember Charlie Rocket. A black comic. He was part of the cast. And they had to fire him because he had problems reading. I think he was not able to read, actually. And so they're sitting at the pool. Richie gets a call. Saturday Night Live wants to see Eddie Murphy. And he tells Eddie, and Eddie's like, "Screw that. They already turned me down." And Richie goes, "No, they want to see you again," because they had to get rid of this other comedian. And so they flew together back to New York. And Eddie went for the audition. Richie said to him first, "Can you read?" He goes, yeah, I can read. He goes, good.
Wow.
Then you'll be great for the audition. And he went, and they accepted him, and that's how he got on. And they spent the first 11 years of his career together through Beverly Hills Cop. So in 1985, Chris Rock is working at the club, and I think this is a great story too. Chris is
you
working
told
at
me
the
this
club.
story, yeah.
Eddie comes in one night. Now, when Eddie Murphy came into the club, people were thrilled because he was the biggest star in the world. Eddie was the Elvis of comedy. No one ever dressed like that. He wore red leather suits. I mean, he was really cool. Most comics look like they're trying to be homeless, you know? But Eddie had style, and he had a flair about him, and he was something very special, right? So when he came into the club, people were thrilled, right? So he stops by around 1985. Chris is like 19 years old, and he's working in the club. They would let him go on late night because he had no experience. Late night is after the last show. You go on for like 6 drunks. There's hardly anybody in the audience, right? and he had never performed before a big audience before. Eddie comes in and he says to Richie, are there any black comics I can see? And believe it or not, in those days, there were very few black comics. George Wallace was around. There were a few, but the only person there was Chris, who fit the bill. So they didn't want Eddie to leave. So Richie discussed it with Lucian Hold, who was the longtime manager of the club, and he goes, well, let's put Chris up on stage. Now, it was a Friday night, and the place was packed. And Chris had never performed before a big audience before. Wow. And he knew that Eddie was there, and Eddie was his idol. So you can imagine how nervous he must have been. Wow. And they put Chris on stage, and he kills, right? He crushes the room. Now, Chris told me the story himself, and he says, I don't think I did that well that night. But he heard Eddie laughing from the side, because Eddie has he's got a very distinctive laugh. So he knew Eddie's laugh, right? So he heard Eddie laughing, so he knew that it was cool. So when he was finished, Eddie was waiting for him, and they sat talking together. They had this big window seat in the club, and Eddie had a bodyguard. I think his name was Fruity, something like that. He was always with him, and he made sure that nobody bothered them. And Eddie gave Chris his phone number. And he said, call me, right? So a few days later, Chris is walking in the street, and he runs into a guy named Louis Ferranda, who's been running Caroline's for many years. Yeah, but in those days, he was a bartender at Catch a Rising Star.
Wow.
Right. That's when I first met him, when he was a bartender there. And the word had gotten out in the comedy community that Eddie really thought that Chris was very talented. So Louis says to Chris, hey, I gave him his number. He's like, did you call him? He goes, nah, man, I'm too nervous to call him. He's like, schmuck, if Eddie Murphy gives you his number, call the guy, right? So he calls him, and Eddie invites him to come to a movie with him and his entourage, and Eddie's mother was in there, and he goes with him, and from that, he wound up inviting Eddie to come to L.A. with him to go to the set. They were doing reshoots for the movie Golden Child. And he said, to tell you how long ago it was, he goes, Spike Lee was out in the street selling T-shirts for his movie, right?
Wow.
And he goes, that's how long ago.
Trying to raise money.
He goes, and so I said to Chris, did you go to LA? He goes, yeah, of course. He goes, I borrowed clothes from my brothers. He goes, we were kind of poor. He said, I never even had a shrimp cocktail. I remember telling me, he goes, my father used to buy one shrimp and cut it into 7 pieces. we had like, I think there's like 7 brothers, right?
Yeah.
So he goes, yeah, we went and he went out to LA and he went to the shoot, and Richie noticed that Chris wasn't eating really. He was, you know. So he said, what's up? He goes, well, I can't afford like $15 for a hamburger. He goes, man, it's on Eddie, man. Paramount's paying. You don't have to pay anything for this. So he goes, at the end of that, that's when Eddie created a part for Chris in Beverly Hills Cop 2. He created the part of the parking valet.
Wow.
And that's what made Chris's career. And so Chris has always been very loyal to Richie and very connected to the club. And that's why when I did the book, Make 'Em Laugh, Chris wrote the introduction to the book.
Wow.
Yeah, that is, man. It's about being in the right place at the right time. Chris lived in the club. Like I said, he was only 19, but he had such a great love for comedy. Sometimes he'd sleep in his car. He was there all the time, hoping that if somebody got canceled, that they'd call him to go on. You know, so he was there, he was ready. So talk about being
On the grind, man. That's what I was thinking about, man.
So that's what
I love hearing these stories, man, because it's and you got to witness so many different people's birth, you know, and their grind and, you know, their effort. I remember something Kevin Hart said to me about talking to people, right? He said, you know, when the comedians of the past or, you know, prior to him, they had to meet people at the comedy club.
Right.
He's talking to all his fans on Twitter at the time.
Yeah.
So he was responding to every single person.
Right.
And Jeffrey mentioned he was always on his phone, constantly
He didn't
talking to
stop.
people. And I remember talking to other comedians and saying, look, this is what Kevin Hart's doing.
Yeah.
He's actually talking to people on Twitter every day. And he's like, I'm not doing that.
Do you know that when I saw
People used to
Kevin,
say, I'm not doing that. And then look.
right, when I saw Kevin last summer at the Just for Laughs festival, I told him, you know, I always shoot a little video with him. So the first time, years ago, he did it at the comic strip. He came by. It was for Black History Month. And I said, wow, you got 2 million followers now, right? And he said, no, 3, don't short me 1 million. I remember him saying that. Now he's got 100 million followers between Instagram and Twitter. But he claimed he didn't know. He's like, no, I don't know how many I got. So it's funny because he used to know exactly the figures, but when you're up to 100 million, I think he's got like 70 million on Instagram and 30 million on Twitter or something like that. It's so sick that you can reach that many people with one click of your finger.
But you know what's so
But
crazy?
he's so humble.
Yeah.
He's such a humble guy and such a just a really nice person. Like they were like dragging him off because, you know, publicists always do that.
Yeah.
And he stopped. He saw me and he came over to talk, and we did this interview. And he's always been very kind that way. He's just a really good dude. And I'm so glad that he recovered so well from that terrible accident. Horrible. And look, he does movies with The Rock. He does movies with Tiffany Haddish came over, and she's a good friend of mine. And she told me, you know, they did this funny thing. When she was living in her car, there was a time when Tiffany was having really bad problems financially. She was really struggling, and Kevin lent her $300. And he will never take it back from her. And she's been trying to pay it back ever since.
So she tried to do it like on an award show.
She did it up to Just for Laughs. She gave him this little tiny pair of sneakers because she makes fun of him, big and small. And she put the $300 in there, and he gave it back to her. He won't take it. And she did it on the stage, and he goes, why are you trying to embarrass me in front of all these white people? Trying to give me $300. She's determined to pay him back.
Yeah.
She's hilarious.
She should just donate to a charity that he's part of.
Well, I'm sure she knows what to do.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of a running joke.
Yeah, it's a running joke.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
what
running
it is.
joke.
Running
Yeah.
joke.
She needed money so badly,
Yeah.
and he came to her aid. in
That's
those
cool,
days.
man.
And that's really, really cool. And look at her now. If the girls trip, you know, she blew up. You know, Amanda Seales. Look,
Amanda Seales used to come to our parties. Her name back then was Amanda Diva. She used to come to my parties
Really?
the singer.
That's why she looks
that's
so
married.
familiar.
Yes,
Yeah.
she used to come to all our parties. The other singer that used to wear the funny color socks. She's married to the basketball player. She's a singer.
I'm not sure I know who you mean.
Oh my goodness.
It'll come to you as soon as we get off the air.
She's a singer. She's married to her. She used to play for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Ahmad Shepard. Tiana Taylor.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes, yeah.
Tiana Taylor used to come to all our parties.
Wasn't she married?
Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Tiana Taylor used to come to all our parties.
Wasn't she married to Iman Shumpert?
Iman Shumpert, that's the name.
She's still
Yeah,
with
him.
She's still with him.
So that's the thing. Isn't
Amanda, her career blew
Yeah.
up too. She's amazing. She was
Amanda-
at Caroline's recently. I went to see her.
and she was so back then. She was so shy, man.
Yeah.
She was
now
very
she's
quiet.
Now she's on The Real.
The real.
Yeah. She just
Yeah.
Speaking her mind.
Yep. Yep.
Speaking her mind. Yo, congratulations,
Absolutely.
man.
So it just shows when you work hard. The comedy world is a very hard world to make a place for yourself in.
Yeah.
There's so much competition, especially these days. There's millions of comedians. Years ago, there was a handful of comedians, you know? Now everybody's a comedian. Every state has comedy clubs. Everybody thinks
Right.
they're funny, you know, and it's crazy. It's crazy. So it's really hard. So you have to work very hard to get yourself known, to find a place for yourself. So these people, it just shows that when you work hard and if you have talent behind you, that's the key.
Yeah.
You got to be funny. That's what Rodney once told me. I said, Rodney, look at all the jokes I wrote for you. He goes, yeah, Jeff, but they got to be funny, you know?
Yeah, they gotta be funny,
right,
So throughout all the years, right, what have you learned that could help someone that's getting into a business today? Like any entrepreneur or, a dentist.
Well, the key is perseverance. I talk about that a lot in my book. I hope we're going to get a chance to.
We're going to talk about it right now. That's the
because
plug.
Cool. Yeah, because you have to believe in yourself, and and you have to have perseverance because life is difficult, and every person faces obstacles in their lives. Now, I wrote this book. I never thought I'd have one book. Now I have 6 books, right? And my newest book. It became a bestseller on Amazon, and it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. Can I hold that up for your camera to see?
Yeah.
It's got a picture of a dog in lotus position. You know how hard it is to get a dog in lotus position?
Yeah. I haven't tried it before.
But the most important part of the title, it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, but the subtitle is what's important: a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. Now, I heard that you were talking about that earlier. Spirituality is very different than religion, and it's very important to make that distinction because a lot of people tune out as soon as they think you're talking about religion. Religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us because it puts you in a category, and other people are automatically outside of that category. But spirituality brings everybody together.
Exactly.
Because all it asks is that you believe in a force greater than yourself.
Exactly.
And you could call it nature, the universe, God, whatever is comfortable for you.
Yes.
As long as you realize it isn't you, because when you think that it's you that's controlling your life, then you blame yourself for everything that doesn't go the way you think it should go, right? So when you're supposed to work to get the things that you think you're supposed to have, but if you don't get them, it's not because you're being punished. It's because you're supposed to have something better than that.
wasn't
That's
for
the
you.
key. That's a spiritual concept.
That's a spiritual
Absolutely.
concept.
Yeah, that you're not supposed to think that you're the ultimate victim of the universe and that nothing works out for you.
Right.
It's that there's a better plan for you. The problem is that you have to have patience. And as human beings, we lack patience. We want everything right away.
Right now.
We're not willing to wait. So we get frustrated. And we live in the past. And we start telling ourselves, well, what I should have said, what I could have done. And then we worry about the future, that we're never going to get the things we want. And meanwhile, we lose the now. We lose today, right?
And that's the essence of meditation.
Yes.
Exactly.
The now.
And so many people are living in the past and worrying about the future, and they're losing the now. And then they feel like their life is flying by and they're not accomplishing anything. So in my particular case, my main obstacle was that I stuttered very badly. I started stuttering when I was 7 years old. And I stuttered well through my 20s and beyond. And I stuttered so badly that I couldn't even say my name. I could never say Gurian. And most stutterers have a hard time saying their names. And as an avocation, I work with stutterers and I teach them how not to stutter. And one day I realized, I was given the grace to realize I didn't stutter when I was alone. I could go into a room and speak much better. I could speak perfectly when I was by myself, but when I tried to talk to somebody else, I would stutter very badly. And I realized that you can't have a disability based on your location. You know, if a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak perfectly alone, then it means that theoretically there's nothing wrong with me.
It's
It's something I created in my mind. And I had to figure out what it was that I created. And I realized that all of us are holding thoughts that are not valid for us. And very often they're thoughts that were given to us by people who didn't have our best interests at heart.
Wow.
Like if you were bullied as a kid in some way, anytime, from the time that you're a child, anytime someone has said something to you that hurt your feelings, insulted you, broke a promise to you, broke up with you in a relationship, all those things we carry with us. I call them heart wounds. We carry them in our heart chakra, and they stay with you. They don't go away. You know that silly saying they teach you as a kid, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you. It's
false.
the furthest from the truth.
It's false, yeah.
Because all the bruises you had as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every single one of us can remember something that someone said to us that hurt our feelings, and it feels like it was yesterday.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right? For some reason, the traumatic events in our lives are embedded deeper than the happy events. It's almost easier to remember the trauma.
Absolutely.
And during the course of our day, things happen or people cross our path that set off triggers that remind us of that. So you can be happy and suddenly you feel sad and you're not even sure why, because something crossed your path that triggered an old memory that's stuck in what we call cellular memory.
Yep.
And cellular memory is fascinating to me because it means that every single thing that you've ever experienced in your senses since you're born is still inside of you. So it's the reason why you could hear a song and it'll remind you of the girl you liked in the 3rd grade, right? Or you smell somebody's perfume and you're like, wow, my kindergarten teacher wore that perfume. It's like a sensory deja vu.
Yeah.
It takes you right back to that
Right
experience. So when you experience these triggers, it takes you back. So what I had to do for myself, I worked on myself for many years and I took my mind apart and I realized that I was holding thoughts that were not valid for me. And it's very hard to be objective about your thoughts because if you have any intelligence at all, you tend to believe your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But every time you have to make a decision in your life, you use your thoughts to figure out what to do.
Right.
You think to yourself, what should I do here? And you use your thoughts. But if your thoughts are not valid, your decisions are not going to work for you, which is why people go through life with the same patterns that don't work. They get the same kind of job that doesn't work for them. They're not satisfied. The same kind of relationship, they keep breaking up. And the only common denominator is them.
Right.
Right? You're dating all different people. The only person that keeps showing up is you.
That's
Right? So it can't always be the other people that there's something wrong with. You're drawing something into your life because of a misbelief that you're holding or an energy that you're putting out. So my book is about healing your heart by changing your mind, is healing the heart wounds of the past by changing the way you think, by allowing yourself to realize that you can change a thought. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, you know? And so we have to let go of the negative thoughts that are holding us back.
Absolutely.
And when you do that, you can achieve success in your life. Yes, and so you can see on the back, if you look at my reviews, I got very meaningful reviews from psychiatrists, from psychologists, from people in recovery centers, because people who are addicted to substances, alcohol and drugs and stuff, they need to change the way they think. I do a lot of work with people in 12-step programs, and a lot of it is about allowing yourself to change the way you think and incorporating spirituality into your life. All these 12-step programs are all about spirituality.
It is. It really
about
is.
incorporating, and again, you can be agnostic and still get better, but it's about incorporating a feeling of God and spirituality into your life.
Right.
It's important to have those roots, you know, to have something that you can count on, again, so that you don't think it's up to you to make your life work perfectly.
Right.
Because blaming yourself is the cause of a lot of emotional illness. So there's so many people in the world that are depressed and sad.
It's true.
And
that's a big thing.
my book is about how to achieve happiness. So I give people different tips, how to start your day. Like something very simple for me is like, if you come to my house, and Gene's been in my house, it's a very happy place. Everything is light and bright. My carpeting is white. My piano is white. Nothing racial about that, by the way.
No,
it's just it's
a color of purity.
It's brightness. It's brightness. I have bright colors all around, you know, and I have pictures of things. I always tell people, put pictures. Every place you look in your home should be something that makes you feel good when you see it, because once you leave the house, you have no control over what the universe has in store for you.
Right.
You know, every time you make a left or a right, your whole life is different. And you can't dwell on that because you would become catatonic. You wouldn't move.
Right.
Whichever way you go is the way you're supposed to go. That the universe has a plan for you. So one way you may win the lottery, the other way you might trip and skin your knee. Who knows, right? But the idea is that you're being guided all the time. You can't only believe in these principles when it's convenient for you. Anybody could do that. It's easy to say that when your life is going
when
great.
Everything is going well.
Right? Real easy to do that. It's when things feel like they're not going well at all. I've had times in my life when it felt like nothing was working for me, and I would be very depressed because I'm a very sensitive person. So when I feel things, I experience them to the depth of my soul. Right? So I know what it feels like to be sad, and I know what it feels like to be depressed and feel like nothing is going right. And that's when it's important to believe in this, to understand that this is part of my path. I had a heart attack in 2015, right? And I was on stage 5 days later. I didn't realize how serious it was. I had what they call a widowmaker heart attack. a lot of people don't survive that. And I was given the grace to come through it. It happened in the middle of the day. I had never been sick before, never had anything serious. And I had this blockage. They said I had a 95% blockage in the major artery to my heart. Wow. And I wound up in an ambulance. It was a crazy story. I went and told some cops in the street. You know, it's very awkward to stop strangers in the street and tell them that you think you're having a heart attack. There's something really crazy about that. But I had no choice because I had this weird pain in my chest. So I knocked on the window. There happened to be a police van there. And I said, I'm sorry to bother you. And it was pouring rain. I'm standing with an umbrella. And I said, I'm sorry to bother you in my most polite way. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And the cop's like, well, I think you should go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm telling you. I'm not just telling everyone, you know? And I thought that they would say, jump in and put the siren on and drive me to the hospital. But that's not what happened. He's like, well, we're stuck in traffic. I think it'll be faster if you walk. So I said, well, where's the nearest hospital? And he didn't know. None of the cops knew where the hospital was. He takes out his phone and he starts looking for hospitals, right?
What?
I swear, this is like, I'm not exaggerating either. So he said to me, do you have Google Maps? And I'm like, no, I don't. He said, well, I think you should download Google Maps. And seriously, that's why I walked away. I'm like, this is crazy, man. This is like a Woody Allen movie. I tell the cop I'm having a heart attack. He tells me to download Google Maps.
Protecting to serve, right?
But I could only get another half a block, right? I could only, because the pain got so bad.
Shout out to the NYPD.
So I stopped another, and this is not anti-police. I don't know. Okay, it's not anti-police. But this was really my experience. Yeah. So I went another half a block, and there's another cop on a walkie-talkie. So I say the same thing to him. I'm sorry to bother you. And I think it's because I was so calm. Maybe because I stayed really calm, because they expect you to be screaming and on the floor. And I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I think I'm having a heart attack. And he said, well, stand on the side over here, right? So I'm standing on the side a couple of minutes, and I said to them, are they coming? And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't call them yet. So like no one was taking it really serious, right? So then a fire engine pulls up first, because a lot of these guys are EMTs, right? Yeah. Fire engine pulls up, 4 or 5 guys get off. He says, who's the patient? I'm like, me. He says, well, climb up on the truck. I'm going, are you serious? He goes, nah, I'm just fucking with you, like that, right? So I couldn't believe it. So finally the ambulance comes, and they take me in the ambulance, right? And they get me to the hospital, and I laid in the emergency room for 9 hours. Luckily, from 3 in the afternoon till midnight, they didn't have a room for me in the cardiac unit. And it was only through the grace of God that I survived. Some genius put me on blood thinners. They didn't even know that for sure that I was having a heart attack, because the kind of heart attack I had doesn't show on an EKG. Gotcha. It's called a non-ST wave, something like that. Anyway, the next day, they took me in because they said, this looks a lot more serious than we thought. And they put a stent in. And the way I tell it, they accidentally saved my life. Right? And what I had to realize when I was in the midst of all that is that that's my path for that time, that I needed to go through that. For whatever reason, I can't start thinking, well, I have terrible luck, because it turned out that I had very good luck. Because if I had to have something like that happen to me, so it happened during the day, first of all. Some people have it happen at night. And they get back into bed and they never get out of bed. It's true. You know, because the thought occurred to me when I first had the pain, I wanted to get back into bed. I was on my way to a chiropractor's appointment. And I said, maybe I should just get in bed and rest. So that was luck that I didn't make that choice. Because again, a lot of people don't get out of bed. And then I went on the subway and the pain was getting worse and worse. And then I had that whole thing. But it turned out that they saved me. And they suggested to me, don't think about it. Just try and lead your life. The truth is, I think about it more now than I did then. Really, because it weighs on you. When you go through a thing like that, in the beginning, like I said, I was on stage 5 days later. I went to the comedy club, and the owner said to me, what, are you crazy? You just had a heart attack. And I'm like, yeah, but it's hard to get a spot at this club. I don't want to lose my spot.
I don't want to lose my spot.
Right. He thought I was...
The grind.
Yeah, the grind, exactly. I was very dedicated to doing what I do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, chapter 10... I'm just trying to. I'm curious.
Yeah.
So it says why we love sports. What does sports have to do?
It's funny that you would pick that.
Because I was thinking about Kobe. I was thinking about
No, because I'm not a sports fan.
Yeah.
And I think that people try to live vicariously through sports people. I think that that if you're not going to do something, why do you want to watch somebody do it? It's like sex. You want to watch or you want to do it? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to be watching people. If I'm not participating, I don't want to be there. You know what I mean?
True.
So like people stay home. They dedicate their whole lives to watching other people play a game.
Yeah.
And we pay our sports figures millions and millions of dollars. You know who deserves people who save people's lives deserve millions of dollars.
Right.
Teachers deserve millions of dollars. People who better our society deserve that. What's so special about throwing a ball? It's great. But to give people $30, $40, $50 million a year to play ball, it's a distortion to me, and I don't get it. And I find it offensive, actually, that that's our priorities, that people go insane. And people fight at games. They kill each other because their team didn't win.
Yeah. I don't understand. I don't even understand the concept of fantasy. Like the fantasy thing, I'm like, people are like, oh, I can't do it. It just takes too much time.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because for a time, like you can almost feel un-American if you don't like sports or unmasculine. I'm like, I like to play sports. When I was a kid, I would play different sports. But to sit around and watch other guys do it and spend so much of my life dedicating my life to watching others. So that's why I wrote a chapter about it, that I think it's stupid. Why we love sports is because we live vicariously through it. Instead of doing it ourselves, you love sports that much, go out and play.
Right. You know, it's funny because we're in the Garden, and I'm a diehard Knicks fan, and it's hard being a Knicks fan. When you are emotionally attached to the Knicks, they take you through this emotional roller coaster, like, we're going to win, and all of a sudden you lose. It does something to you emotionally. And when I started, going on my spiritual path, I was like, I can't do this. I have to be distant. I can, hope they win, but for me to invest emotional, and I'm not getting paid the millions they're getting paid. They leave. Like Carmelo's walking off the court. He's good. I just made a quick, 100,000 tonight.
Exactly. And men are in the stands, literally screaming, losing their voice. I can't scream like that for anybody. I don't get it. I mean, screaming. And men dressing up in costumes and mascots.
They're not passionate like that
jerseys.
for their own families.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Their own kids.
They're lacking purpose.
It's misplaced. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, you can enjoy. Look, I can enjoy watching somebody do something. I enjoy anybody that has skill.
Yeah.
I like watching the Olympics is great. When you're watching the top against the top, I like MMA stuff. Yeah. It's cool. But I wouldn't be in the stand screaming for anybody. I can't get myself to do that. I don't know if it's because I'm a quiet person. I mean, I have a personality. It's hard to go out on stage and tell jokes, man.
But being successful,
You mentioned one chapter in the book about sports, but if there was another chapter that I would talk about that I think would be good for your listeners is the chapter on fear.
Fear. Yes.
Because we're all fighting fear, and there's two main fears that people encounter in life. It's the fear of not getting what we want, and the fear of losing what we have, and the fear of not getting what we want.
That's true.
And so any fear that you have, you can usually put it into one of those two categories. And fear holds us back. It's self-sabotage,
Absolutely.
It tells us there's a part of our mind, the subconscious mind, that doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction. My subconscious mind told me that I needed to stutter. And as you can see, I no longer stutter. I was given the grace to cure myself, right? And as I said, now I work with people and I teach them my technique of how not to stutter, how to control your mind to the point where you don't have to do that. And it takes a lot of work. But fear is something that I confront on a daily basis. And I try and make myself do everything that's uncomfortable to me. Like in October, I went to Japan by myself. And that was like the scariest thing I could think of to do. For some reason, I had some fascination. It was always my dream to go to Japan. I should have realized I have really crazy dreams. So I don't know why. It was fascinating. It was great, but it's a 14-hour flight, right? That's a long time to be on a plane, man. And I have fears of getting lost because I have really severe ADD. So ADD causes a lot of confusion. So I don't have a sense of direction. So wherever I go, I'm lost. And I always have to ask people to help me. And it's a scary thing. Confusion causes fear. So my choice is either stay home and go nowhere, or I look at it this way. I see the airport is filled with millions of people, and they're all traveling places. And so I tell myself, if they can do it, I have to be able to do it.
Right.
I make myself do things that other people seem to do comfortably. That's a challenge to me.
Right.
So my trip was very interesting, but I consider it a personal challenge because I was literally lost every single day. Because Japan, it's known that they have the most complicated subway system in the world. And the largest subway station in the world is called the Shinjuku Station. And I found myself there many times. And it's thousands of people are coming at you from every direction. And hardly anybody speaks English. They tell you everybody there speaks English. It's not true. And I took Japanese level 1 3 times. It didn't help a lot, believe me. It helped a little bit. I had words, no sentences, But I did it. I stayed in hotels. The concierges speak English, and they helped me get around. And I performed in 2 shows while I was there.
Oh, nice.
I went to different cities.
Nice.
I took the bullet train. They have these trains that go 300 miles an hour. The point, though, is that I'm always confronting fear. When I went to dental school, I had a real problem in school. I was ostracized. This is another interesting story, and I'll try to make it brief, but I was humiliated. I grew a mustache, and believe it or not, in those days, you were not allowed to have a mustache in Philadelphia. And in school, well, I went to school in Philadelphia, and in that school, if you had a mustache, I was banned from school for 3 weeks. They wouldn't let me see patients. They tried to make me drop out. They told me I was a disgrace to the profession.
Oh, wow.
And I was bullied and harassed on a daily basis for 4 years. And recently, about 3 weeks ago, 2 deans from that school contacted me out of nowhere. They were not the deans when I went to school. They had read about me on the internet, and they asked if they could come to New York to meet me. And I agreed. I agreed with trepidation. I didn't know what they wanted, actually. I thought they were going to ask me to donate to the school because I was treated so poorly that I never donated anything to the school. I was not, I never had anything to do with
I
them.
don't blame you.
Because I was humiliated. Literally, it's hard to explain to somebody how you were bullied and picked on. You wouldn't expect that to happen in a professional school.
No.
But it was like a 4-year fraternity hazing. And when these 2 deans, I agreed to meet with these 2 deans, and they sat down with me in this beautiful restaurant. They drove in from Philly just to meet me. And as I started telling them the story, I mentioned the name of the man who treated me the worst. And before I could say anything about him, the main dean of the school said to me, he was a racist and an anti-Semite. And I said to you, thank you for saying that I didn't have to say it first. This dean said, we knew that. We got rid of all those people. This particular guy, he said he died in a wheelchair. It was like a karmic thing. He was paralyzed, I guess. He was so horrible to me. He had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, the South will rise again. And that's the guy I had to deal with. And no matter how short I cut my hair, it wasn't good enough for him. He said he didn't like my appearance, and I had to go to his office, and I had to turn in a circle for him to okay my appearance in order to be allowed to go back into the clinic.
Wow.
So for 3 weeks, I wasn't allowed to see patients, which was enough time that I almost couldn't graduate. That's how, I mean, it sounds like such a stupid story, but if you've ever been bullied or humiliated, to go through that for 4 years, they tried to take away all my self-confidence and self-esteem, and they told me that I would never be successful.
Right.
And my parents used to say to me, we'll support you in your decision if you want to drop out of school, because they knew how miserable I was. I'd call them in tears. I'm like, I can't take this. And they said, you could drop out. And I said, no, you know what? I'll never drop out. I'll never give them the benefit of knowing that they got the best of me.
Right.
I'm going to succeed no matter what.
Right.
And I did. And so these 2 deans came, and they wound up apologizing to me, and they invited me to the school. They want me to come down this spring. They said, we'll send a car for you. We want you to come down, and we want you to tell your story to the students because we've changed the whole demeanor of the school. We would never allow something like that to happen. But just the fact that he said to me, this guy was a racist and an anti-Semite, and not just him, but there were 3 instructors in particular who chose me to pick on me on literally on a daily basis. And that's so demeaning, so I can relate to it. When people are not treated well, they try to take away everything about you. Like in the army, that's why they shave your head. They take away your identity. Everybody is entitled to have their own identity. But when you're in the army, they want everybody to be the same. And that's what this guy, on the first day of school, I'll never forget, the dean made a speech. He said, we don't want any free thinkers here. If you want to be a hippie with a guitar, go to dental school in California. And that was the attitude. And they were so restrictive to the point where it was just a horrible experience for me. I had to shake that in order to be, how do you go into practice and have confidence when people have told you that you're going to be a failure?
Right.
I graduated at the top half of my class. I was number 54 out of 126 students because I had to work so hard. So I've taken that and I do it in every area of my life. I'm on the grind all the time, like you. Like you. I learned that you have to confront fear.
You do.
You have to tell yourself that those thoughts are not valid.
Yeah.
That part of your mind that tells you you can't do it, you're arguing with your own mind.
Yeah.
So in order for me to stop stuttering, I had to convince my subconscious mind that there was really nothing wrong with me. And that part of your mind gets smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it disappears.
Yeah. Regret is worse than fear.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a false evidence appearing
False evidence
real.
appearing real.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's it.
Instead of F everything and run.
Yeah.
That's the other way of looking at it. That's how
That's
people
it.
look at it
That's
in the
it.
beginning.
Yeah, the fight or
But-
flight. Yeah, you
Right,
can't.
and
You have to eventually stand up. It's like sticking up to that bully that one time, and even if you got to fight,
Fear is a bully.
respect it.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Fear is a bully, and it wants you to stay home and do nothing.
Yeah. Right.
Get under the covers and pull them over your head and do nothing. And you have to say F you to the fear.
Yeah.
You have to stand up to the fear just the way you do with bully, and bullies disappear when you do that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Now the humorous part. What is a humorous approach that you can take to that?
Well, it's not about telling jokes. Like, even when I was in practice, people would say, are you sure you're in comedy? Because you're so serious. Like, I'm serious about everything I do. The humorous approach is like, if you come to my house, it's filled with balloons
Okay.
and crayons.
Yeah.
And when you walk into my house, my assistant is here. He can vouch for that. I just found polka dot balloons. And it may seem childish to some people,
Right.
but I surround myself with toys, with little things that make me laugh.
Yeah.
I collect things when I travel. Anything, any little novelty. But as I said, I have crayons around, and I just things that I've collected over the years. You'd think that children live there.
Yeah.
My kids are grown already. They
Okay.
don't, but my grandkids love to come over because I have toys all over the
Yeah.
place. And I do it for me. Like, on my stove, I have a pot filled with balloons. Like, I offer
Right.
people balloon soup, and paper pasta. And I've had it there for years. And you know what? I do it for me
I love it.
because
You're
I
setting
need
the
that.
environment right.
yeah, you have to stay connected to your inner child.
Yeah.
When you were a little boy and your friends would come and say, Colbert, could you come out to play? You'd feel really happy that you were going to do something fun.
Right.
But that's not supposed to stop. Just because you grow up and you're supposed to do grown-up things,
Right.
it doesn't mean that you can't still have fun.
Exactly.
You have to stay connected to that inner child that
true.
was in there. That's what keeps you healthy.
Right.
And I really believe that's one of the things that helped me get through that health problem.
I love it.
I went to my cardiologist just last week because I promised that I would come every 6 months. And they found out that I had a torn valve, right? And the only way to fix that is some kind of surgery. But thank God I have no symptoms. So they said, well, as long as you have no symptoms, we don't have to do anything. So I went last week, and he said to me, they did this test, and he said to me, I don't know how, but it looks like your heart got better in the last 6 months. And I say, you know what? It's grace, and it's because I look at things in a certain way. I think it's a spiritual connection
It is.
that helps you to do that. That if you don't dwell on it, if you try to think of things in a positive way, my goal is always to put out positive energy to the universe.
Likewise.
I love everybody until they teach me not to.
Right. Exactly.
I come into it, I embrace people, I hug people because I like people. That's who I am.
Absolutely.
Until they teach me not to. There are some people that there's evil in the world.
Of
man.
course.
There's definitely a lot of negative people. You read that all the time. You see this poor French guy that got his neck slashed last week just by walking in the street.
Right.
I don't know if you saw that
No, I
story.
didn't.
We were just walking through Harlem on 132nd Street, and some lunatic came and slashed his whole neck. He's lucky that he survived. They
Wow.
cut his throat for nothing, just out of nowhere. So there's streets are filled with maniacs.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful. But there's so many good people in the world too.
There is.
And and so you can draw that into your life. You tend to draw in what you put out. It's a karmic thing.
Yes.
And so I always say that I love everyone until they teach me not to.
I love that.
I don't,
That's true.
and that's how I go through my life. So I'm hoping that maybe that's one of the things that's helping me to feel good.
I love it.
You know?
Absolutely.
It definitely is healing your heart. It makes a
It's
hunch.
funny because when I wrote Healing Your Heart, I wasn't thinking about my own personal heart.
Yeah.
It's about the heart that we all experience,
Yeah.
the heart wounds that I said that we carry
Yeah.
from the pain of growing up. Life is difficult.
but it's literally,
And we all
yeah.
have these pains that we experience that we have to overcome. We can't let them guide us.
Mhm.
We have to release them and work on. And it takes work.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It
Yeah.
takes work, but it's worth it because you're the product. You're working on yourself,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
and you're making yourself a better person.
That's funny.
And every person that changes that way changes the people around them.
It's 100%
You know?
right.
So
Powerful.
that's one of the reasons that I was so glad you asked me to come on today because you are inspirational, you know, and I know faith, grind, and inspire. All those words are very important,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but to inspire people, there's nothing better that you can do to inspire people to do better,
Mhm.
to do better things with their lives.
And that leads us to the last question. Out of the 3 words,
Yeah.
faith, grind, inspire, Jeff, which word resonates with you and why?
Well, it's so funny because from what all we've said, you know that all 3 resonate with
Yeah, I
me.
know.
But I would say inspire because, yeah, to inspire people is a great gift. It's one thing to accomplish things on your own, but then you become an inspiration to other people. There's I wonder if I have it with me. There's a saying, this is money, that's not it.
Nice.
And that inspires people too. But you know what? I wonder. Oh, I do have it. I carry this saying with me. Look how ripped up it is. But I'm going to read this because I
Sure.
think your people will really appreciate it. This is an amazing thing, and of course I have to print up a new one. It's all ripped. It's called About Fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory within us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That is the most powerful statement that I've ever read, which is why I carry it with me. Some people attribute it to Nelson Mandela, and other people attribute it to Marianne Williamson because it's in her book, A Course in Miracles.
I love that.
But the point is that it's up to you, that you don't have to hold yourself back. When I was stuttering, I was holding myself back to make other people feel better about themselves. It's okay to be a superstar. When you're a superstar, you inspire other people and you tell them that they can do it as well. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking. That's so important to me.
Yeah, that light.
Make yourself as big as you can. It doesn't mean that you're egotistical, that you're trying to show off. It shows other people that it's possible to be successful.
That's it.
So you inspire people. So that's your message, and that's another reason I was happy to come on today, that we could talk about that, because I love talking about it. As you can see, I love talking about stuff like that. To inspire people is
You've
one
always
of the
been an
nicest
inspiration
things.
to me. So, and I'm glad throughout the 11, 12, 13 years, we still remain friends, and and you're still on that path, and you're
amazing.
inspiring so many people. Number one, a bestseller book,
it.
you know?
Healing your
Like,
heart by
I'm
changing
very
your
So,
mind.
honored
guys,
that's doing so well.
go-
And it's an ebook, it's a
it's an ebook
paperback,
too. Okay.
and it's also an audio book for people who like to listen to their books.
All right.
Yeah, and it's
So, where can people
on-
find it?
on Amazon.
Amazon?
There's very few
Audible?
bookstores left, but yeah, on Audible and in Barnes and Noble. Again, it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And right now it's up to 116 mostly 5-star reviews. You can see it
Nice.
on Amazon. Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's a great honor to me that it seems to be resonating with people. It's really resonating. People,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the dog or what, or the information.
You got
but
everybody
people are
loves
saying
dogs,
good
yeah.
stuff about. Well, dog is God spelled backwards. You
Yeah.
ever know that?
Yeah.
and
man's best
it's like,
friend, huh?
yeah, exactly. It's a very powerful thing. So,
where can people find you?
They can find me on my website, which is comedymatterstv.com. You can avoid all the show business stuff if you want, and then there's a whole under the About column is My Cure for Stuttering, My Cure for Headache Therapy. Spirituality and Healing has its own page. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Jeffrey Gurian. That's spelled Gurian, Jeffrey. So many people misspell Jeffrey today. They do Jeffrey. It's Jeffrey.
R-E-Y.
Gurian. And my YouTube channel, Comedy Matters TV, on YouTube, youtube.com/Comedy Matters TV. Over 500 interviews with all the comedians that you love: Kevin Hart, D.L. Hughley, Patrice O'Neill. I had the honor of being Patrice O'Neill's co-host on the Black Phillip Show. And they're doing a documentary on him right now, as a matter of fact. Bill Burr and Comedy Central are doing that.
That's good.
And I just gave them rare footage of me and Patrice up at the studio. He used to let me bring my camera up there, and they didn't have that footage. So hopefully that will be in the doc. But that was one of my greatest honors, was being Patrice's co-host, because he was a comedy philosopher, and he had a lot of good stuff to say. Yeah. And so there's over 500 videos, over 2 million views on my Comedy Matters TV YouTube channel. So please check that out and subscribe. And my podcast is called Comedy Matters TV, the podcast. And that's up on iTunes and Spotify and every place where you can find a podcast. The episode that's up now is the one with Richie Tinkin, who discovered Chris Rock and who managed Eddie Murphy for 11 years. So if you want to hear that story from the man himself, check out the podcast, the Comedy Matters TV podcast, the podcast.
Another great episode. I want to thank Jeffrey Gurian. I want to thank my man Kobe. I want to thank all the producers. Matt, thank you so much. Brianna, thank you. To the audience, thank you. Guys, you catch us every Wednesday, and we want to continue to share some light, share some inspiration to you guys, and go out and buy this book, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, Dr. Jeffrey Gurian. All right. So go read this book and listen to his podcast. Go check out his website and follow him. Connect. This guy is a connector. He's never been afraid to not share contacts and share people and share his knowledge. And as long as you're doing good by the world, man, he's going to do good by you, bro. So, and sis. So let's continue to shine, continue to grind, and keep going no matter what. God bless. Peace.
Peace.
Peace out.